a little uncomfortable. I sat in the passenger seat of Sarah's car. She'd allowed Alexander 5 minutes in private to say goodbye to me. The whole argument would have been funny if not for the fact that I was on the losing side. After all, Sarah was 7 years Alexander's junior, and she totally strong-armed him to do as she said. Of course it didn't help that Alexander knew she was right and wasn't really putting up that much of a fight. He'd taken me aside, straight into his office, and attacked my lips as soon as the door closed. That was the reason I was uncomfortable now. Sarah was wearing that knowing smile on her face, and it was very unsettling. We were nearly there when she said suddenly, "I know this is private for a lot of people, but we're friends, right?" Confused, I nodded. "Of course we are. How does your mark look?" I stared at her. "Mark? Did she mean the hickey?" "Yeah, your soulmate mark," Sarah clarified. I was still staring, but I really didn't know what she was talking about. I knew Alexander had said something once about how the hickey wasn't a real mark, because that should be permanent. But I was pretty sure I didn't have anything like that. "He hasn't marked you yet?" Sarah's eyebrows climbed up in surprise, and then she was suddenly pulling her shirt up to show her left hip. Just above the line of her pants there was a marking. It looked silvery lined with black. With elegant lines and dots, they shaped a heart encircled with pretty swirls and music notes entwined. It seemed almost alive and flowed with her skin. The colors like nothing ink could do. "This is mine." Not all marks actually have a heart. They are unique for each couple and reflect a little of their personalities. That's why a lot of couples hide them. They are afraid to reveal things about themselves to others. Alexander was going to give me a mark like that? How would he do it? I scrunched up my face as I tried to imagine it. Would it involve him biting me? No. Dennis didn't have fangs, and he'd marked Sarah, so that couldn't be it. Sarah smiled. "The heart reflects how passio Alex we both are. The swirls indicate sense and steam. They're for Dennis's talents as a cook, amongst other things, while the music notes are for me." "It's very beautiful, miss. It seems a little weird that just the females get the mark. It's like marking territory or something." That seemed a little off to me. I didn't want to go around with this big sign saying I was Alexander's, while nobody could tell he was mine. Sarah laughed. "You get to mark him too, Brittany. Dennis has the same mark as I do, but his is right over his heart. You should start thinking about where you want yours and where you'd want to mark Alexander. It's important you get that mark soon. Werewolves can smell you're marked. They'll leave you alone after that. It's very sacred in their culture. In every culture, really. Least in the vampire culture, though. Werewolves? Of course there would also be werewolves out there. Silly not to expect that. Yeah, Fort's one actually, and so is Mr. Cook's. Fort is going to be the next alpha in town when his father dies. Nobody likes him, though." I shivered as I processed that information and remembered my dream about Fort changing into a wolf. I told Sarah about it and she smiled. "You seem really sensitive to all kinds of supernatural stuff. Like the mind reading too. Alex told me how good you are at talking to him mentally already. Seems like you picked up on what he was unconsciously." We'd reached the big house, and I hesitated in getting out. "How do you make that mark?" A knowing look appeared on Sarah's face again, and then she smirked. "You'll know, Brittany. Don't worry about it." As I marched up the steps to the house and pulled out my keys, I felt Alexander touch my mind gently. "Be strong, a gramokroi. You know how to reach me if you need anything." I waved as Sarah drove away and then stepped into the house, only just in time remembering that I was supposedly sick, slumping my shoulders and fake coughing once I shuffled up the stairs to my room without saying hello to anyone. There I hurriedly changed into PJs and crawled in bed with a book, if my stepmother would come looking for me. I looked credible enough now, and I knew that Hay would find me in my room if he wanted me. Soon, there was a knock on my door, and then Stephanie burst in. "Where have you been all day?" I pretended to be drowsy as I looked at her and then said softly, "In bed mostly. I called in sick at school, caught a bug." The woman frowned at me suspiciously, but then her expression cleared. "You weren't here, though. I had the nanny check your room when Jennifer called that you were not at school. Plain that? And if you're sick, then you won't mind if I check your temperature." I shrugged and explained that as I'd been sleeping over at Sarah, she'd let me sleep because I was sick and she had just driven me home a short while ago. I'd spend the day in bed in her guest room, not here. When my stepmother went to get the thermometer, I hurriedly went to the bathroom and stuck a washcloth under the hot water tap. running it so hot that it steamed. I took that with me and hid it in my lap under the duvet. I knew Stephanie would be easily distracted, so I could pop the thermometer in the hot washcloth, tweaking the temperature just a little. I was lucky because her phone rang, and I managed to get the thermometer to the point where it looked like I had just a tiny bit of a fever. I held it up to her while she was still talking on the phone, and as she read the number, she nodded, obviously looking a little defeated. When she hung up, she told me, "Fine, you're sick. That means you're not going to school tomorrow either." The woman watched in satisfaction as my face fell. No Alexander tomorrow. The evil woman had known I didn't want that. She sashayed out of my room saying, "I'll make sure the maids keep an eye on you. If you need anything, you can ask them." "Oh, and I want your phone. You're not talking to your friends till you're better." As the door closed behind her, I tossed the washcloth out and angrily clenched my fists. They just always knew how to get to me. Alexander touched my mind. "You all right, Agramokroy? Are you in trouble?" With the thought came a sense of warmth and love. I went to shake my head and then realized he couldn't see that, and angled a thought towards him instead. "No, I'm not." I managed to convince her I really was sick. Correction, am sick. But now she won't let me go to school tomorrow. And she took my phone. I knew he could feel how upset I was about that fact. It meant I wouldn't be seeing him until Friday. "I can always sneak in through your bedroom window." The thought held a dark, sensual promise that made my skin feel a little too tight. He seemed to know I wouldn't take him up on that offer and send another thought. "We can talk like this, Agramokoi. It is effortless now. We don't need phones. I can sense you are still full of questions. Ask away." I shivered, but was glad to oblige. "When you feed, how does that work? Do you go to a bar and pick up a person and just bite them?" I sensed amusement as he took a moment to formulate a reply. "I don't like going to bars. The taste of blood infused with alcohol. I don't like it. But yes, we do just walk up to our victim and bite them. Every vamp does it differently. Some use hypnotism, others just wipe the memory away, others pretend it to be a love bite, whatever works." "And how do you do it?" I wondered if he could use hypnotism. That would be a little scary. I'd never know when he would do it to me. "I make them sleep." "Britt," he said. "Sarah. She can compel them with her mind. Like I said, she is strongly telepathic." "Bob, he makes them feel like they're seriously hungover the next day." I took a moment to take in that information. Hungover? Making people sleep? That was pretty awesome. That reminded me that I wanted to ask him about the powers. "You mentioned powers. What was that about? What kind of powers?" It was quiet for a while again, but I could sense that he was thinking of how to reply. It was true. This link between our minds. It was so easy to hear him even though he was a 10-minute drive away from me. As vampires age, they gain power. It works much the same as the immortality fusing with our cells, except that there is a blueprint in our bodies. One can only gain as much power and talents as one already had the blueprint for. Some vampires will always remain weak, others gain strength and power rapidly. He was quiet again. I could tell that he was lying on his back on his bed, staring at the ceiling but not really seeing it. "What powers do you have?" I asked when the silence stretched. Amusement came back to me. "Many Agramoshoi. You'll find out over time," I groaned. "That's not fair, Alexander. You said I could ask you anything. I said you could ask me anything. I never said I would answer them all." But even as he said those words, he continued with, "At least you know I can put people to sleep. I also can light things on fire with a thought or a touch. Our talents are closely entwined with our personalities." I smiled. "So that's how you lit all those candles last night?" "Very good, Agramokroy." "Alexander, Sarah told me about the marks. Will you explain?" Silence. Then I could vaguely sense anger flare inside him, but it wasn't very clear, almost as if he was keeping me out. "She wasn't supposed to tell you that," came his thought at last. Suddenly, I felt mad about that. And why not? I have a right to know. Or were you just going to mark me without my consent? I didn't know exactly where that came from. Alexander had been nothing but gentle and all. Though he seemed to have a penchant for secrets, he'd told me what he was on our very first date. Alexander's reply sounded controlled and a little cold, but the words softened me. "It was my right to tell you, Brittany. I wanted to give you time to get adjusted to what I am first." The mark is irreversible. I will not do that to you until you are absolutely sure. I instantly felt guilty about the harsh words I'd spoken to him. He'd only been looking out for me. It was obvious that it hurt him to think that I might not want him. He was good at hiding what he felt. I almost hadn't noticed through that thick layer of control. I'm sorry, Alexander. Sending him the strong feeling of belonging and love and wholeness I felt around him. I hoped it was enough to ensure him that I did not want to be without him. A giggle suddenly escaped my lips as I realized how far our relationship had suddenly progressed. We'd only had one date yet. This whole soulmate concept, we both knew we'd never love another, never. Alexander sensed what I felt, and suddenly his amusement seeped through, his worries obviously eased. You are so human, Agremolcroy. Before I could reply to that, Andy burst into my room. His face flushed, his bronze curls messy and several colorful stains on his white shirt. It seemed he'd been allowed to paint today. Brittany, you're home, he squealed as he jumped up on my bed and dove into my arms. I laughed as I hugged my little brother. Hey, giant. Had fun today? Then I sent Alexander. I'm sorry I need to spend some time with Hay. Let's finish this later? Andy went to close the door as he told about painting at school and the teacher getting mad at him because he'd made a mess. He looked a little too proud about that, so I knew he'd done it on purpose. Alexander touched my mind gently. If it's okay with you, I'd like to watch for a moment. I've not had the chance yet to meet Andy. I nodded and then sent back. All right, how does that work? Just relax and open your mind. It's fine like this. A warm spot in my mind, and I knew he could see what I saw and hear what I heard. The rest of the evening I spent talking with Hay while Alexander listened in, although I knew that at some point he'd picked up a book to read. I read Andy's stories, and then we made up our own stories together. The next day was spent in a similar fashion. Although during the day I was rather bored and lonely, Alexander had classes to teach and couldn't talk, and I didn't know how to reach Sarah or even if I would be able to. Andy was at school himself, but he was home at 2 again and stormed up to my room. I think the nanny was very relieved that I didn't mind spending time with him. She seemed hard-pressed to put up with all his antics. Alexander sent me a warm thought when he finished school, filled with longing that I felt reflected in myself. Already my body seemed on edge, strained like butter stretched too thin over toast. Andy seemed oblivious to the tension. Alexander shut me out just after 7 p.m. One final thought telling me not to worry, and that he was going over to the next town to feed. I was sure he told me this deliberately to test if I was okay with it. He didn't want to strain me and scare me away, but he also wanted to show me clearly what he was, so I had the chance to decide whether or not I could live with that. He didn't realize that I had long since made that decision. Nothing he did or said could change my mind about it. Although I knew we didn't really have a choice either, I was sure the strain on my body would kill me if I couldn't be with him. I knew it was the same for him. Just before I fell asleep that night, my head filled with that lullaby. Alexander's voice softly singing it to me and guiding me into the warm embrace of sleep. The next morning, I was up and dressed, ready for school way before Jennifer was done. As she entered the kitchen and saw me, she quirked an eyebrow in question. It wasn't hard to pick up on the fact that I wanted very badly to go to school. Before she could get her own breakfast, she disappeared up the stairs again. I heard her call her mother. My heart sunk. She was going to get her mom to make me stay home again. I couldn't face another day alone, so I scrambled for the door, slinging my backpack over my shoulder. It was still early. If I hurried, I could walk and still be in time. Today was Friday, and I had the feeling that if I didn't see Alexander today, I wouldn't be able to all weekend. I had heard my stepmother say that father was coming home again today, and I knew he hadn't forgotten that I was grounded, even though I felt like he had no right to do that anymore. Since I was 18, according to him, it was his house, so his rules. I was halfway out the drive when Stephanie's scream froze me in my tracks. Get back here, Brittany. You are not going to school when you might still be sick. To the neighbors, that might have made her sound like a concerned mother, but to me, it sounded like the Wicked Witch of the West. This had nothing to do with my health, and everything with their plot against me seeing my friends and Alexander. Somehow Jennifer had guessed about my feelings for him, and possibly his feelings for me too. I turned slowly, cast Stephanie one look, and told her, "I want to go. You can't stop me. I have a right to go to school." Then I turned and kept walking, only to stumble into something solid and warm. I went sprawling to the pavement, my bag tearing open and scattering my books across the curb. I yelped as the palms of my hands burned when I caught myself with them, tiny pebbles embedding themselves in the fragile skin and blood already welling where skin had been torn off. "Brittany Baker, didn't I tell you to obey your mother?" a stern voice thundered. My eyes found the shining black leather shoes, the immaculate suit in unrelieved black, the wide shoulders and the golden-rimmed glasses balanced on a firm hooked nose. Blue eyes glaring at me with such cold anger that I wondered why my blood wasn't freezing over. "Father," I said breathlessly, "I just want to go to school. I already missed 2 days because I was sick. I don't want to miss any more." I didn't care that I sounded like a bookworm, or a nerd as Jennifer would call it. He frowned and cast a look at Stephanie, who stood on the steps at the front door. She wore a green silk robe embroidered in flowers and birds, the fabric ending just above her knees, the robe falling open to reveal her ample cleavage. The woman was pouting at him, and his expression firmed as he turned back to look at me. "Get inside, Brittany, now." Anger rolled off him like a heavy fog, and I scrambled to my feet, gathering my books in my torn back in a rush. A savage kick to my side sent me sprawling across the pavement again. Dazed, I lay there for a moment, trying to figure out what had happened as pain blossomed across my side. My father had kicked me. I blinked as tears jumped to me eyes, and then there was a touch on my mind. "Britt, you're hurt. Hang on. I'm coming for you." Alexander's presence in my head gave me strength. "No," I snapped at him. "I can handle this myself." I did not want him here, not where Jennifer and Stephanie could see him, not where he could get hurt, and not where he could see my sorry excuse of a father. I knew Alexander wouldn't be able to control himself. I felt him accept what I'd said, and then he sent back, "You will call me if it gets out of hand." The thought was nearly a snarl, and I could vividly see him clutching the steering wheel as he drove to school, his face twisted in anger. I had to hold back the thought that things had already gotten out of hand and struggled to my feet, clutching my bag to me as I stared at the man that somehow had the right to call himself my father. Alexander didn't withdraw his presence from my mind, leaving just the tiniest trace so that I knew he was there for me, so that I could draw strength from him. "Get inside the house, Brittany." My father snarled at me, but I knew he didn't sound as threatening as Alexander did when he wanted to. Still, my heart beat in my chest in fear and anger combined, and I didn't fight it as, with a sense of defeat, I walked back into the house. At 5:30, Stephanie and Jennifer came to my bedroom door. I had been locked in pretty much all day. I didn't mind that except for the crawling tension on my skin. Alexander had reached for me a few times more, always asking me if I wanted him to come and get me. I knew he could feel the throbbing in my side where a large bruise was spreading, vividly purple and blue. Stephanie was smiling with fake warmness as she sat down on the bed beside me. "Feeling better, honey?" Suspiciously, I eyed what Jennifer was holding, red cloth and a pair of heels. The girl herself wore a tiny black number with slits on either side till high up her thighs. It revealed the long length of her legs. "I felt fine this morning. I wanted to go to school," I told my stepmother with a glower in her direction. My palms. I rubbed gently over the rough fabric of my jeans. The damage to it hadn't been too bad, only the top layer of skin missing where I'd hit the pavement. "You had a fever," Stephanie said, and she reached her hand out to touch my forehead. "But it's gone now." Her voice was still sickly sweet, but there was a hard edge to her eyes. "My fever was gone yesterday. I was perfectly fine this morning," I said as I stood up and out of reach. "Don't take that tone with me, young lady," Stephanie said, standing up herself and narrowing her eyes at me. Her sugary manners gone, she snapped a hand out, and Jennifer quickly placed the red cloth in it. "Put this on, and those heels, and get your hair and makeup done. We're all dealing with clients of your father. Don't even think about misbehaving. If this deal falls through, your father will have your head." The red cloth was pressed into my hands roughly, and Jennifer tossed the heels down at my feet. The both of them spun on their own heels and stalked out the door with swaying hips. It was near identical, except that Jennifer wore a black dress while Stephanie's was a more stylish blue. I hated to admit it, but they both dressed to kill. Their style a little too revealing for my taste, but they never looked tacky or cheap, simply deadly beautiful. With a shock, I realized that the pang in my chest was jealousy. Stupid. They were horrible people. I had no reason to be jealous. 20 minutes later, I found myself showered and dressed in a bright red dress, sporadically decorated with sparkling sequins. While it still showed off my figure and brought out the red in my hair, it was screaming and nothing like the sophisticated dark red dress I'd worn on my date with Alexander. Jennifer had stalked back into my room and was running a brush through my hair with harsh strokes. It felt like she wanted to yank all the hairs right off my scalp. It was hard trusting her with the makeup, but I forced myself to relax and let her do it. Struggling would probably only result in pain, and the whole ordeal would last much longer too. Besides, Jennifer knew what she was doing, and I didn't think she'd make me look bad. If that was what she wanted, I wouldn't be wearing this red dress, but something pink and frilly. But if they wanted me to look good, that couldn't mean much good either. Who was this client we were meeting tonight? A client that my father obviously wanted to impress very much. 6:30. I found myself following my so-called family into a fancy-looking restaurant. Andy wasn't present. Luckily, he'd been allowed to stay home with the nanny. That both worried me and made me feel relieved. Whatever it was they had in store for me tonight, they obviously thought Andy didn't need to see it. Inside the restaurant, a waiter brought us to a private dining room and took our coats from us. Shortly after we'd all taken seats, my father's client arrived with his family. The man was in his late 30s, and so was his wife. The man wore a dark suit that looked expensive and had dark blonde hair, combed back neatly to reveal an austere-looking face. His wife was thin and tall with flawless milky white skin and flowing black hair. She looked a little like I'd imagined Snow White to look, albeit a darker, more dangerous version. She wore a skin-following silver-gray dress that reached the floor and pooled around her ankles like quicksilver. As she walked, she seemed to almost glide. They were followed in by a young man, at the most 20 years old. He had the same dark blonde hair as his father, but the flawless pale skin of his mother. Dark, intelligent eyes looked around from above a straight nose and a cruelly smiling mouth. As my father introduced us, the boy didn't hide the fact that he was raking his eyes over both Jennifer and I with obvious interest. The man, I was told, was Carl Miller and his wife Amanda Miller. The boy was called Luke, and he held my hand longer than necessary. To my horror, my father had arranged the table seatings in such a way that he was right in between Jennifer and I. Jennifer didn't seem to mind the attention he gave her, because despite that, he gave me cold chills with his creepy stare. He was still handsome. But I did not appreciate the hand creeping up my skirt every other minute during dinner. I kept slapping him away and once stomped on his toes really hard. It didn't seem to bother him as he smirked at me. Creep seemed to like it even. I understood now why they'd dressed me up. I served as a distraction along with Jennifer to keep the son busy. If I pissed off this Luke, I was sure the deal would be off too. On top of that, Alexander had been keeping tabs on me, checking in mentally every 30 minutes or so to make sure I was still okay. It seemed like he didn't believe I would call for him when I needed help. Of course, his definition of when I needed said help was different from mine. Had he known Luke kept creeping his hand up my skirt, he'd have been here within 10 minutes to teach him a lesson. A lesson I was sure I wouldn't want to see. I had to find a way to keep my emotions in check very quickly, or he'd know what was going on the next time he touched my mind with his. This mental connection thing was something I was certainly getting the hang of, but for now it was still mostly a one-way street. I could talk to him if he was within my reach, but I didn't know if I reached him until he replied, and I could only sense what he was feeling when he allowed me to. I envisioned a wall made of iron around my mind, putting all my emotions behind it so they were hidden. Just in time too, because I had just finished the wall and slapped away Luke's hand again when I felt him reach out to me. Gramokwai, how are things? It was clear that he was extremely worried and fed up with not being allowed to come and get me. He wanted very badly to be able to touch me in a very earthly fashion instead of with his mind. It's fine, we're having dinner with a client of my father. I told you not to worry. I miss you, but I'll see you soon, okay? Now leave me alone. I need to concentrate. Silence met my thought, and although I didn't actually feel any of his emotions, I could guess that I had offended him. He didn't like it that I was shutting him out in the least. I love you, Alexander. I said, hoping that would make him feel better. I tried imbuing the thought with as much love as possible without opening a gaping hole in my iron wall. I slapped away Luke's hand again and shot him a glare, which he received with an arrogant smirk on his face. He kept staring at me for a minute or so, and I pretended not to notice as I ate. I couldn't wait for this to be over. Yet this was only the first course, and I knew several more would follow. I love you too, Egramochwai, more than anything. Be careful. Alexander's thought was a gentle caress that gave me shivers and made my heart clench. There was no trace of offense, just the sincerity of his words that had me near staggering. Luke's eyes snapped to mine as if he knew something had happened and a little flustered about his piercing gaze. I stood up quickly. Excuse me, I said as I hurried out of the room towards the bathroom. I could feel all eyes on me as I left. A look over my shoulder told me my father was glaring. He seemed to think I was being very impolite. Jennifer and Stephanie, and even Mrs. Miller looked at me with speculative looks. But more unsettling was Luke. I could not name what was reflected in his eyes, but there seemed to be a challenge hidden in there. I took my time in the bathroom. Maybe they'd serve the next course by the time I got out. I hoped this dinner wouldn't last till deep in the night because I wasn't sure how long I could keep with politely pushing Luke's hand away. I pretended to touch up on my makeup, but knew I couldn't stay away for more. Then 5 minutes. My father would definitely be mad at me if I did. As I stepped out into the corridor, I realized with a shiver that it was empty except for Luke. Bloody hell. Why did he have to follow me? Hello, Brittany. His voice was low and suave, and as he sauntered over to me, his movements possessed an even glide that looked nearly fluid. Arrogant. Luke, I said as I inclined my head just the slightest bit in acknowledgement. My skin was prickling, telling me to get the fuck away from here. Danger? He radiated. Danger, as if he was a predator. I sidestepped him and started back towards the dining room, but a hand on my arm stopped me, his fingers warm. Not so fast, dear, the boy said. His voice had an edge to it that I hadn't noticed before. I don't like games, got it? So stop playing hard to get. You don't want to make me angry. My father is very powerful. I shivered, but I forced out a laugh. Your father doesn't scare me, Luke. Which was true. It was my own father that scared me, very much. I was terrified of what he could do to Andy. You should be, he said as he trapped me between himself and a wall. His eyes were cold as he glared at me. It was obvious he wasn't used to this reaction at all. I pushed at his chest, having déjà vus with Fort in a similar position. Let me go. They're waiting for us. They can wait, he replied darkly. I could pinpoint the exact moment his mood changed. His dark eyes lightened but got more intense, the pupil widening. The moment that happened, he pressed his body hard against mine, one hand sliding into my hair to grip it tightly. He yanked my head sideways and attached his lips to the sensitive skin of my neck. Just a taste. A little taste, he murmured, teeth grazing over the skin, pointy teeth. Oh my God. He was a vampire. I have a mate, Luke, a very powerful mate, and he'll be seriously pissed off if you bite me, I said, trying to sound brave. Something I most definitely didn't feel right now. It was only because I'd locked my knees that they didn't shake. His body tensed, and he moved his face so he could look me in the eye, his nostrils flaring as if he was trying to smell something. Liar, he hissed after a short moment, his fangs showing, which confirmed that he was a vampire indeed. You're not marked. I felt my stomach plummet and found myself wishing that I at least had the hickey to show him, but that had faded and was nearly gone. Not visible enough. You noticed before? I talked telepathically with him, I said, hoping he would believe me and not mistake it for a bluff. One thought is all it takes to call him. He can be here in 5 minutes flat. I let the knowledge that this was the truth bleed onto my face. My eyes narrowed and absolutely serious. He didn't need to know that it was still terrifying to be alone with him for 5 minutes. There was a lot he could still do. Apparently, he wasn't as smart as he appeared because he narrowed his eyes and said, "You are lying. Besides your mates, is no match for my father." I forced myself to laugh again, even though I had no clue whether or not Alexander would be a match for his father. "You hide behind your father, too scared to fight yourself?" My tone of voice sarcastic, but I knew he could hear my heart beating wildly in my chest. His hand in my hair yanked my head back harshly, his eyes spitting fire. "I don't need to fight. Your sissy boy will take one look at my dad and run away with his tail between his legs." Without waiting any further, he buried his face in my neck, his fangs grazing the skin while his free hand roughly pressed my lower half against him, my spine arching painfully. "The next course is served. Are you coming?" At that exact moment, I could honestly say that I loved Jennifer very much. Her timing couldn't have been better. I shoved against Luke's chest hard and was shocked when he actually let go and stumbled back a little. I brought up my hand and slapped him hard across the face, on his cheek, a blazing hand mark flaring to life, while the rest of the skin around it looked pale. "Don't ever do that without permission again. I'm very sure you'll run out of willing partners shortly." Then I stiffened my spine and strode past Jennifer, who stared at me with open-mouthed surprise. My hand was tingling from the impact to his face, but I felt very satisfied as I sat down in my chair at the table. I plastered a very polite smile to my face and greeted the Millers, nodding at my dad and then smiling at Stephanie. My father looked pleased for some reason. A minute or 3 later, Luke strode into the room, wiping the back of his hand across his mouth as if he'd just eaten. I felt nauseous as I thought about that. Was Jennifer all right? His cheek was markless again, and I wasn't surprised. Surely vampires had fast healing powers. Just then, the girl strode into the room herself, smiling wickedly. My eyes scanned her throat and neck, and I drew in a relieved breath when I noted that she was unmarked. No matter how much I hated her, I didn't wish for her to be food for a vampire. As we all sat down and continued eating, I noted how all the Millers ate little, yet their plates appeared just as empty as that of my family. Every plate, however, had deep edges and artful double layers. I guess they served to hide the food. "So, your son seems to have taken a liking towards my daughter," I heard my father suddenly say. I could tell he nodded in my direction, and suddenly, Mr. Miller was looking at me intently, sizing me up in a way that I was sure didn't bode well for me. Just at that moment, Luke decided to stretch his arm and drape it across the back of my chair. I wanted to shrug it off, but a look at my father's face made me decide to grin and bear. I did, however, stomp on his foot again, with the heel of my shoe. He didn't even wince. Mr. Miller nodded slowly. "So it seems, perhaps we can talk business now." A calculating smile on the man's face told me he knew I knew what he was, and that he knew the liking was not mutual. 2 more courses followed and then dessert, but I had lost all my appetite. I couldn't do anything about Luke's arm around my shoulders, and it felt disgusting to have him play with my hair and stroke the skin of my neck or throat. His other hand was also still occasionally trying to make its way up and under my skirt, but at least I could keep slapping that one away. At one point, he pinched my leg hard and painfully, as if to show me he did not appreciate the slaps. The hungry look in his eyes, combined with a knowing smirk, was seriously pissing me off, and I was half tempted to call for Alexander. But I was afraid that Luke's father really was very strong. I had no way to tell. I didn't want Alexander to get hurt. During dessert, Luke completely ignored Jennifer, and the fact that she really didn't seem to mind that was unsettling. Very unsettling. So when at last the deal was apparently made and we were all done eating, my father asked for the check and then paid. I was hurriedly getting into my coat so that I could hide from Luke's hungry stare. It felt good to hide all the exposed skin. Knowing my dad would scold me if I didn't say goodbye politely, I turned to shake Mrs. Miller her hand. "It was nice meeting you, Mrs. Miller. Good night." She looked utterly startled when I did that, and then my father's hand closed over my shoulder. "Brittany, weren't you listening?" His voice sounded more exasperated than anything, but he also seemed happy, gleefully so. "Red gauze? I have no head for business, father. My apologies." I had to wrench the words from my mouth and fight down the bile that rose along with my pride. I had to behave now, or I would never be allowed to go over to the Clinton house tomorrow. The Millers have offered to take you and Brittany. You are going home with them, my father